I was serving on the staff of the Naval Air Forces Atlantic, and our job was really to support aircraft carriers that deployed to the Mediterranean. Each aircraft carrier is outfitted with maintenance shops, and their job is to fix things that break there so we don't have to ship them all the way back to the States. And one of the data points that we watch through the whole deployment is how many items are in the maintenance area needing to be fixed, but they're awaiting parts. They can't be fixed there. And so, given that background, one day I was called to the Admiral's office, and I was asked this question: should we fire the supply officer and the maintenance officer, and it happened to be on the USS America that was operating over in the Med? Vice Admiral Dunn was a 3-star admiral. And I said, well, gee, let me go take a look at it. But the basis of his question really was this: we had had 2 deployments with carriers the previous year, and I was charting the waiting parts with control charts. And the Saratoga went over in '84 and early '85, and their upper control limit was around 20, an average of about 10. Coral Sea, a little worse, an older ship, by the way, but that was the way they looked. And then, if you look at the numbers, again, the upper control limit, the lower was 20 or 26. But the USS America departed in 1986, and all of a sudden their awaiting parts went just like this. Back in those days, those of you that were here in 1986, the America got into bed, and 2 weeks later they were bombing Libya. So they had to go to battle right away. And that's what readiness is in the United States Navy. But there must have been a problem. It seemed to be this carrier, who was a more modern carrier, was not doing as well as other carriers. And so I wrote a message to the maintenance officer and said, next time you're in port, give me a call. I need to know what's going on. We didn't have the internet in those days. We didn't have Skype. I had to wait till he got to port so he could actually give me a call, and we talked. And I said, what's going on? It seems like there's a whole bunch of stuff you're not fixing. And his answer to me was that, well, here we have, just to review, the 19 to 26. Right after this, the America showed 35 parts awaiting parts. And the maintenance officer said to me, he said, well, our problem is a thing called the ALQ-126A. This is a black box component that's electronic countermeasures, and it fouls up the enemy's radar. It either makes your plane visible, or it tells the enemy your plane is somewhere it isn't. And it's a very, very important piece of gear for the safety of our pilots as they go into battle. They were having trouble getting parts for the ALQ-126A. And here's what I discovered. In 1983, the Navy made a decision that we would have an upgraded version of the 126B to replace the 126A. In 1984, the supply agency quit buying spare parts for the ALQ-126A. There would be no more deployments with the ALQ-126A after 1985. But production problems occurred with the contractor. The government didn't accept the equipment. It was all piling up in the government bond room. And with that background, the America deployed in 1986 with ALQ-126A equipment. And I walk into Admiral Dunn's office again, and I said, Admiral Dunn, we have a problem. And he looked up, I remember to this day, pointed his finger right at my nose and said, Phil, if we have a problem, you have a problem. I guess that's how 3-star admirals work. And I did. But I personally chaired 2 meetings at our aviation supply office. We found working equipment at Oceana Naval Air Station, as well as Ruby Island up in Washington. We did extraordinary support for the America on this one piece of equipment during the remainder of the deployment. And oh, by the way, this is their awaiting part story, once we understood what the problem was and how we could do it. Deming's job, he used to say, the management job is to work on a system. Well, this system was broke, wasn't it? And management job, which was my job, was to work on the system. My theme is, if you want victims, you focus on people, but if you want improvement, you will focus on the system and follow what the good doctor told us. There is an epilogue. The supply officer and the maintenance officer were promoted to captain the following year. And I couldn't have been prouder, because they were in the system and they were going to lose their careers for something they had nothing to do with except doing their best efforts. They were tremendous. Second example, the bowling center manager is about to be fired. One of the jobs that Bill and I had was out at the Miramar Naval Air Station. We made a lot of friends out there, and we'd go out every now and then after we did the training and play golf with some of them. And one day we were playing golf with the bowling center manager and the athletic director. And it was around the 16th hole that the bowling center manager said to us casually, "They're trying to fire me." And we said, no, they wouldn't do that. You've been there for 10 years, very successful, very popular. They wouldn't do that. No, they are. And in fact, she pulled out a letter that said this: "This letter of caution was written to express my concern that your performance in managing the bowling center has become less than satisfactory." Now, Bill and I both know a lot about the civil service rules, and this was serious. This is not just kidding. And so right away I asked her, I said, "Well, do you have any records? What's going on?" She said, "I don't know what's going on. Everything's working the same for me." And she happened to have a bunch of records. A pack rat is what she was. And all of a sudden some boxes of financial reports were given to me, and I could go through and analyze and see what had actually happened. While I was doing that, though, she received a second letter of proposed removal of this notice that I proposed to remove you from employment as a manager of the bowling center no earlier than, and there was a date. "And under your management, the bowling center has gone from a $20,000 profit in '91 to a loss of $37,900 in '92, and for the first 7 months of '93, it lost $32,000. He had all the information, and boy, that was building the case. Now, this is where Bill went into action. I was doing the analysis, but he was about to fire the bowling center manager. And we thought it was much more important to have her stay on the base and have a job while we were fighting this, rather than get kicked off the base and get to fight this from the outside. And so Bill, with his contacts with 2 congressmen, and we got the congressional officers involved, and we got the commanding officer to understand that we think an injustice is happening, and that we're not done working on this yet, but we really don't want her to be fired before this happens. We got the word to the commanding officer that there were 2 16-inch guns called congressmen pointed at his head if he takes undue action before we get the case together. And so she actually kept the job until we could do our full analysis. Well, here's what happened. I looked at the total income of the bowling center, and it was just normal variation. You draw a control chart, not a big deal there. Program income, again, not anything astounding. I got to get a pointer out here. Normal variation. But then I looked at expenses, and I found this. Let me just put that down a minute. See that area right there? I called her up and I said, "What happened in the bowling center on October 1992? Without hesitation, she said, "That's the month they changed the bowling center from a single cost center to 2 cost centers, the bowling alley and the bar and the snack bar." So there was a significant change that occurred right then. Not only is the statistician's job is to find what's wrong, but when it went wrong. And this was an analysis that let us know when it went wrong. So I looked at some of the expense accounts, and it was cost of goods, expense, labor, and these are all the high level in these categories. But I looked at a category called general and administration, and that's the result of what we saw. And in fact, that amount of money that was different than normal variation was $120,000 of loss expenses. Well, we had to now I could get rid of all those boxes of information except one. And I just had to get out the financial reports for general and administration. And that was the catch-all for lots of different charges. And here's what we actually found out was going on there. Utility charges were incorrect. All the utility charges for the bowling center and the bar and the snack bar were against the bowling center. Not good. We found 3 salaries mischarged: a bartender, an officer club cook, and a night supervisor at the enlisted club. Actual charges that should never have been in that record. Depreciation charges for equipment that should have been transferred to the bar and snack bar were against the bowling center. And finally, there's some shared services such as security, maintenance, and custodial that the bowling alley was paying the whole bill, not splitting it out. At this time, there was a total of $93,800 of incorrect charges. Now, as we found each one of these, we sent a memo off to the comptroller requesting correction of the record, as well as her boss, who was trying to fire her. And the result of all this is that she received a letter, cancellation of notice of proposed removal. My review of the detailed data you presented to the department identifies discrepancies which significantly reduce the financial losses identified in reference A. I have decided to cancel reference A. Isn't that neat? He wasn't done yet, though. He was still mad, so here's paragraph 2. You should not construe the cancellation of reference A to mean that I now consider your performance as manager of the bowling center to be satisfactory. Isn't it nice to have people like this? Well, Bill